Hi Year 12. So we've got a video on the poem Nostalgia now. This is, I think, the poem in the collection which stands out the most from any other. It's least like the others, for a number of reasons that we'll look at. But it does. So this poem follows Beachcomber in our chronology. And I put it after Beachcomber because it does share some similarities with Beachcomber. So, for example, we're looking at memory again. We're looking at the pain or the difficulty in dredging up certain memories. But what this doesn't have, Nostalgia doesn't have the kind of autobiographical feeling that many of Duffy's poems do, and it also doesn't focus on one particular person's experience, and often we think that is autobiographical, we think it's Duffy, but even if it's not, it's usually centred on one person, like one persona. But this poem is totally different, doesn't have that autobiographical feel at all, and it's set in the distant past, and rather it tells the story of like anonymous figures from a non-specific distant past, these mercenaries. So although some of the themes are similar, the way that it is told from a narrative point of view makes it quite different. So it's a good one to kind of throw in as we're coming towards the end, because I think you've probably gained enough confidence with the poems now that one that's slightly different isn't going to throw you. But just to say kind of from the outset, it is quite different. I'm going to do a shorter first video and just look at the first stanza, and then in the second video we'll look at the second two stanzas. So we'll begin as always by looking at the title of the poem, and the title is Nostalgia. So nostalgia will be a concept that you're familiar with. It's appeared a lot thematically in the anthology so far. So the idea of looking back fondly on your past, remembering snippets from your childhood, trying to conjure up those memories, sometimes those memories being painful, sometimes the pain is rather that you want to go back in time and you can't, a little bit like in Beachcomber. So we've got that recurring theme of nostalgia and memory. Now, nostalgia, I think is helpful to think about this poem, to think about the etymology of nostalgia. So the etymology is like where the word comes from. So it comes from the Greek nostos, which is return, and algos, I think, or algos, meaning pain. So the idea of memories, and even nostalgic memories being painful, is kind of built into the meaning of the word. And this poem talks about the origins of where the word nostalgia comes from, and some of the kind of associated attitudes towards memory and towards feelings of nostalgia. So that's it for the title. It just gives us a kind of clue into the theme. So I'm going to read the first stanza. Those early mercenaries, it made them ill, leaving the mountains, leaving the high fine air to go down, down. What they got was money, dull crude coins clenched in their teeth, strange food, the wrong taste, stones in the belly, and the wrong sounds, the wrong smells, the wrong light, every breath, wrong. They had an ache here, doctor. They pined, wept, grown men. It was killing them. So we'll stop there. This kind of echoes to some of the other poems here, echoes to Cliché Kid in the reference to doctor. The adjective wrong appears a lot in Duffy's writing. We talked in classrooms, or rather you talked in classrooms last week about describing in Before You Were Mine the wrong pavement. There's also the wrong reference to the wrong something in Meantime or First Love. So the idea of something being binary and right and wrong in memory is something that Duffy recurs, a theme that recurs in Duffy's writing again and again. Anyway, so let's look at the start of the stanza then. So the narrative structure is set out in the beginning. This is a reference to early mercenaries, so it's not particularly a point of linguistic interest, but just to be really clear about what mercenaries are. So these are people who would leave home, kind of travel away from home in search of their fortune, usually acting on their own, hiring their fighting the highest bidder to make money for themselves. So a mercenary is someone leaving home in search of money. And it's usually the idea of being an individual and looking out for yourself. And in fact, mercenary has become used as an adjective to describe somebody who is only interested in money and who's very selfish. That's not what it originally meant. It's just kind of over time has it's pejorated. The word has become more negative than its original meaning, and it's been come to describe somebody who's very selfish. So, like I say, it's not a linguistic point. It's more just to clarify what that means. So they're talking about early mercenaries, and I did a bit of kind of Googling on the history. There've been mercenaries around for as long as there's been history, so this could be any point in history, really. Those early mercenaries, it made them ill, leaving the mountains, leaving the high, fine air to go down, down. So get this hyphen at the end of the first line, and structurally, that's kind of symbolising the break, the disruption to these presumably these men's lives, leaving home. And as we see, that what happens when they leave home is that they have kind of negative experience after unpleasant experience, and that hyphen is just breaking syntactically breaking the line, structurally breaking the line, but also symbolising the break in their life, because they're leaving home, they're going away from everything that's familiar to them. So the hyphen symbolises the break in the men's lives, the disruption that it causes to them. So we've got something on level 5, the symbolism, as well as the hyphen on level 6. So it made them ill, leaving the mountains, leaving the high, fine air to go down, down. So we've got a bit of patterning we can pick up on here, because you can pick up on the repetition of leaving, but also the repetition of the adverb down, down. So we've got some repetition here. And what's emphasised is the act of leaving, and the act that they're going down in a literal sense. They're going down from the mountains to new lands. But also that symbolically they are lowering themselves in some way, because what they're going on to do is going on to fight for money. So repetition of the verb and the adverb. So leaving and down, down, emphasises all that's being lost in the pursuit of money. And not just in the pursuit of money, but also all that is being lost by leaving home, leaving what's familiar, and in leaving home. Now this might start to ring some bells. You might be thinking of links to Stafford Afternoons here, the idea that leaving the familiarity and the safety of home for the promise of something exciting, the promise of an adventure, the promise of money, may seem appealing, but it is fraught with danger. Well, we know what happened to the girl in Stafford Afternoons, and the men in the mercenaries, they became ill, and we'll see why in a minute. So all that's being lost in the pursuit of money and leaving home. So there's a bit of a cautionary tale here. And when we think about the poetic voice in this poem, as I've said, it's not autobiographical in any way. Rather, we have this cautionary voice. It seems like an adult voice, somebody warning you to take things slowly and not to try to have too much adventure, not to leave the safety and comfort of your own home. So we have this cautionary tale from an adult persona, but the poetic voice in this poem is definitely harder to pin down than any others. So they're leaving and they go down, down. And I'm just going to put in there, I'd said that the adverb down to me suggested a symbolic lowering. So I'm just going to add that in brackets there. And we've got a bit of symbolism by going down the mountain, literally going down, but also symbolically. So what we got was money, dull, crude coins clenched in the teeth. So that is why the mercenaries would leave home. They would go and sell their services to the highest bidder to earn money. But the money is clearly there is a judgment here about the idea of putting money above the familiarity and the comfort of home, because of the adjectives used to describe the money. So the money is dull and crude. Usually, often money is described as kind of shiny, alluring, but here it is dull, it has no shine, and it is crude, so it's something that should be beneath you to be enticed by. So these adjectives tell us that judgment comes from the poetic voice. So there's a bit, they're judging the mercenaries. Judgment from the poetic voice because of the adjectives. And here we kind of come into the use of this word wrong again. Now, just out of interest, I don't think linguistically there's much in it, but the coins clenched in the teeth. People would do that, they would bite down on money to check whether it was like fake or not. I don't know how you could tell by biting down, but apparently people could, so that's why the coins are clenched in the teeth. So once they'd come down the mountain and they had left home and they had earned money, they would be in a new place and it would have strange food, the wrong taste, stones in the belly, and the wrong sounds, the wrong smells, the wrong light, every breath wrong. So it's unavoidable really to talk about the repetition of wrong, isn't it? Because it is there 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, yes. So clearly Duffy is drawing our attention. Now, I said at the start, wrong appears a lot in Duffy's poetry. And when you say something is wrong, conjures up the idea of a binary right or wrong. So if something's binary, it's either one or the other. So there's the right way to live and the right way to do things, and then the wrong way to live and the wrong way to do things. So there's quite a kind of simplistic, again, judgmental persona. The simplistic judgmental persona here, saying that to leave home and to leave the familiar, then what you encounter is something that is simply wrong. You don't belong there, you belong at home where everything is familiar and safe and right. And if you stray too far from home, then what you will encounter is simply wrong. So it does have that simplistic judgmental persona coming through in those adjectives. Also, again, is cautionary that if you leave, again a bit repetitious here, sorry, if you leave the safety of home, then what you will encounter is something which is simply wrong. So there is a cautionary tale here. And what is wrong is everything really. So The wrong sounds, smells, light, every breath, wrong. So the cautionary nature of this is emphasised by the structure as well as just the repetition of that adjective, isn't it? So it's the syntactical parallelism of the wrong something, the wrong something, the wrong something. So it's syntactically parallel as well as being repetitious, which creates quite a kind of dominating tone to the persona, very judgmental. They had an ache here, doctor. They pined, wept, grown men. It was killing them. So this is where I said I think that it's kind of reminiscent of the cliche kid, where you're talking to a doctor about what's paining you. But rather than being genuine, it's mocking here. The persona, the poetic voice, is mocking the men who left home and who pined and wept. So these verbs here, pined and wept, bring in a slight change in the tone, because there's a realisation that after having got their money, they're somewhere that they don't understand. The food perhaps smells different, things taste different, the place sounds different, they have strayed too far from safety, and that has created an emotional pain. So the men feel this emotional pain and they pine. So you pine for something, you are longing to return, you're longing for a return to something. And then we've got this short line here. There's two things I want you to think about in this stanza. I'm going to come back and talk about this word here in a minute. I want you to think about the use of the word killing. I also want you to think about this phrase here. If we just go back up, the wrong taste, stones in the belly. So that noun phrase, stones in the belly, and that short line, but particularly the verb killing, it was killing them. Those are the two things I want you to think about for this stanza. I'm going to finish by thinking about here. They had an ache here. Now, I'm interested in why it's italicized. I'm just going to dip this down here. So, it's in italics. And it's a demonstrative. They had an ache here. That to me suggests that the poetic voice is pointing at the heart, and there's something kind of particularly poignant about it, which is why it's in italics. And this is then foreshadowing the pain that the men feel because they realise that they shouldn't have left home. Okay, that's it for stanza 1. In video 2 we'll look at the next 2 stanzas.